Good morning. So this session is going to be interactive. As we're going through it, we want you to ask questions. We're going to be asking you questions. This we're going to introduce ourselves in a second, but what we really are here to do is we're talking about how to drive wealth in your business. A lot of what we practice every day in the world of mergers and acquisition is getting people ready to sell. People say, I'm ready to sell my business, and but guess what? They're not ready because they haven't taken the steps required to actually build a business that's saleable. Now, I'll let Bob introduce Provest and himself.
And I'll do this pretty quickly because this is not about us. There's a lot to cover in this short time, but Provest started off in 1990 as a family trust doing acquisitions. So we did a series of acquisitions over a few years and actually ended up selling the last one in 2005. And Aaron and I decided to kind of change the business model of acquiring. Well, we did acquired, fixed, and sold, which is kind of how we got to this presentation. 2005, we went into said what we did well in the finding acquisitions was what we're talking about here. Fixing, process-oriented, McDonaldizing a business so it creates value. Even if you're not trying to sell, the way to create value is to take yourself out of the core business. So it's not you, it's everything else. You know, it's building the process, people management. So again, that's what we started as acquisitions. Now we are the buyer and seller representation. Anybody who wants to talk more about that, we can certainly do that later, but that's the gist of where we come from.
So Bob's the serial entrepreneur. The biggest job I have on a day-to-day basis is keeping him in check because he wants to buy everything. He's an operator, and that's what he does. I'm a finance guy. I'm a detail guy. That's my background. I graduated from Michigan State and way back in the early 80s and started doing acquisitions for a publicly traded company and just fell in love with that whole process. But I really didn't learn more about what I was really good at until I met this guy in '84, and we started building something that created wealth for us. And when we look at that, we really kind of boiled it down into 10 key buckets. And you could look at this about a lot of different things, but in essence, what we talk about exit strategies a lot, right, in our business because people are talking about mergers and acquisitions. The reality of it is what you really want to build is an option strategy. You don't know when someone's going to walk in the door and say, hey, can I give you $10 million for your business? Maybe that's a good number, maybe it's not a good number, right? But when you're prepared for it and you've built your business so that it is saleable, and it's not about necessarily you, then you have something to sell. So let's just jump into these 10 key pieces.
And when we get in here, what we do want to say is I know there's everybody's for a little different spot here. If there's something that pertains to you, we'd like the interactions. How we deal with most of our clients, most of them or all of them are small business owners. We deal in probably under 20 million in gross revenue is our niche. So a lot of it is interactive conversation. So anything, if you go, what the heck do you mean, or this is how it applies to me, just throw that out because that's what's important to us. That's how we'll get something out of this.
So let's start with viewpoint. How do you view your job? And I'm going to pick on Kate because I happen to know Kate. So Kate, now that you have your mouth full, I want to know, how do you describe your company? If someone's going to said you're 30 seconds in an elevator, how do you describe it?
Savorist is the leading company leading company with craft decaf and half-cap coffees. We're a caffeine-conscious leader in the coffee space.
What's your name?
John Kennedy.
John Kennedy? What's your business?
I don't really have a business right now. I'm just kind of here to gather information.
Okay. Anybody else have a business? Yes, ma'am.
I do property management.
Okay.
And I basically almost retired from it, but I want to write a book to be able to sell on how to do it correctly.
Nice. Okay. The key behind when we talk about how you describe your business, what we want to be careful of is that getting to the point where we're talking about you, the company, and not you, that my company is my job. If the company becomes your job, you have nothing that is saleable. You have nothing that creates true value, true wealth, right? What we have right now, we have a process, and we could potentially sell that process, but at the end of the day, Provest, we're the job. I mean, what we do, we've created wealth in different ways, but our business itself isn't what I would call saleable. The process is, but the business isn't.
That's by design.
By design.
We designed that from the beginning, said, this is something that's going to be built around us because of the relationships in the industries, and that's all it's going to be. Again, we have processes, those are saleable, but the business, if we leave, so does the business, because it's very relationship driven.
All relationship. So when we think about building your business, think about it in three things, right? The three P's: people, purpose, process. And if you're building it in those three ways, and not about you as the entrepreneur and the owner, you begin to create something that I can unplug. I can go to Costa Rica. I can go somewhere and have fun for a week, right? That's the kind of thing that you want to be able to do. And I will caution you to avoid the ab-fab, okay? Everybody know what that means? Anything for a buck. Don't generalize, specialize. And I'll give you an example. As a creative person, you might say that I can do videos, I can do logos, I can do all of these different things for my client. And maybe you can. How many staff do you have? How do you build that? How do you create that in such a way that you have now become process-oriented, and I can do it in such a way that I don't have to have an army of people to do that, right? That's a general approach. And if you're a big company, that's easy. If you're a small company, not so easy to do, and it's going to cost you a lot of money. So specialize, don't generalize. You want to take this one? This is all me. Okay, so when we talk about financial performance, it's important to do a couple things. Number one, understand what it is you're trying to track, what it is you want to measure. If you simply remember the thing, what gets measured gets done, right? Then you begin to understand more about your business. Understand what those key drivers are. Understand that, you know, if you surround yourself with the right people, the right advisors, seek that outside counsel, right? Don't be afraid to spend a little bit of money to get the proper advice. When you do that and you set up your books initially and you do it correctly, all of a sudden you have a tremendous amount of knowledge in those numbers. It's not just about creating a balance sheet and a P&L, although I will tell you, you have to understand your monthly financials. I can't tell you how many clients that we have that go, I don't care. I know there's money in the bank. I know I have AR is this, my AP is this, and my cash in the bank is that. I'm good. I know I'm good. It makes it hard, right? So when you do things like set up your books correctly, getting someone to professionally review your books on a periodic basis, it doesn't have to be monthly. It can be semi-annually, it can be quarterly. You know, it can be a QuickBooks specialist, but make sure that it's not just you looking at it. When you have someone like myself, who's more of a forensic accountant, looking at your books, we look at things totally differently. That's just the nature of what we do, right? But we will help you understand the drivers, the true drivers of your business. Even though you think you know, and many of you do, sometimes when you're looking at it, we see things just a little bit different.
Can you give me an example there of like what might seem like a driver of business that, where in reality something else is driving the business?
So, one of the areas that people don't quite understand is when we talk about just sales, and this is one of those things that kind of goes across, right? My sales are down. Why are my sales down? Well, people aren't buying this. Sales game becomes a numbers game, right? This guy right here manages a call center, and he manages someone that they do 50,000 cold calls a year. It's a numbers game. In order to do that successfully, you have to have a game plan. If you don't make the sales calls, you're not going to get the conversions.
But let me talk from a specific. The last company we sold in 2005 was a little bit larger company, not big, 130 employees. I'm not a numbers guy, I'm an operations guy. So I come in and process orient everything. I bring people in, bring the right management in, bring the right worker bees, put in the right technology. That's my job. And make sure it's running right. I would, on a monthly basis, not a quarter, on a monthly basis, I'd have my financial go-to person. She would come and present. We had a technology division that we sold, we had a catalog division, we had a travel division, and we had a graphics division. So we had 4 different divisions. To Aaron's point, I would say, hey, we got money in the bank, we're doing okay. This girl would analyze everything for me and say, here's the areas where we're not making so much money. What happened in IT? You know, your margins are down a bit. You can see that, but what are the drivers behind that? Do I have too much personnel? Am I not charging correctly? So that where I didn't get into the detail. I'm not a detail guy. That's not me. I need somebody to guide me with that detail, saying this is where you're falling down. Here, your graphics department is knocking it out of the ballpark. Why is that? We're charging appropriately, we're staffed appropriately, and when you're not a 1 or 2 man shop, and again, at the time we sold, it was 130 people. The personnel management was critical for us, critical. And again, if you get a guy like me who, that's why he was kidding, I'm not a finance guy. That's not what I do. I'm an operations guy. That's what I understand. I can make things lean. I can listen to the right people, but I have to listen. So it's that professional setup. When we started this, had somebody come in, I set up a great set of books with somebody else. Now, once it's set up, a guy like me, I do all the QuickBooks for Provest. I didn't set it up, you know. So that's coming from a business ownership. There's a lot of drivers that if you're an operator, you may not look at. Aaron gets in and he can tell you where you're falling down, and that I 30 years I've needed somebody to say, this is where we're making money, this is where we're not, this is where we should trim. What's the cost of money? We had a lot of debt out when we were growing. What's the cost of money? What are we doing with our money? There's a lot of integral things when you're trying to grow a business.
And you notice, I'm the finance guy, but I don't do our books. That's kind of like Dr. Heal Thyself. So when I'm working on clients, I'm working on my clients' numbers, not ours. That's all him. That's all him.
So we've met with several different folks, and we've been unable to find somebody that could help us do exactly what you're saying. So you said somebody who can help us actually understand the story behind the numbers.
Okay.
Like we have the numbers, right? We have the reports, and we can do a decent job interpreting them ourselves. But we are actually looking for somebody. And you said so that's forensic accounting is what we should be looking for.
Well, some people call it different things.
Okay.
You know, we can certainly talk after more specific about your situation. There are a number of really good resources locally that you can. I mean, who's your CPA?
You would know Kinder, Michael Kinder.
Okay. Generally speaking, most CPAs are not what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Okay.
The lady I went to was CFO of, if you remember, Dayton Walter, a long time ago. It's no longer around. But you need a business manager type person. She was accounting background, but she was CFO of a very large organization. Took it upon herself to work with us. We were very fortunate. Mm-hmm. But so you need that business side, that understanding, the accounting and the business, which it's a tough thing to find. But it's ours. She was our CFO. We brought her in as a CFO. Understood business, understood the cost of money. Very bright lady. But she had an accounting degree. She wasn't a CPA.
Yeah.
She never went into the CPA side. She went into the business side.
You want someone who has an innate ability to understand the financial statements, that can actually convert that information into intelligible, actionable data for yourself.
Yeah.
And we will think about that if there's anybody.
You use QuickBooks?
We do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And we can do that ourselves, but.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's
But when and we can pull the reports, so we can
it's the
take
analysis.
a stab at
Yeah.
analyzing it, but not
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
like. That's exactly what we've been looking for is somebody who
And
can
that's
help us
tough.
interpret
It's
it.
tough to find somebody.
And part of that is if they're doing it correctly, they're actually sitting down and talking to you about your business. How do you do your business? How do you go about it? What's your sales process look like? You waiting for someone to walk through the door, or is it more aggressive, more forward thinking, right? So, and I don't know what your business is, but we can certainly talk about that. When we talk about growth potential, right? As an investor, we're always looking for things that can grow, you know? So at what rate can your business grow? You think about that, and is it scalable? Many times what we think about is we can only do so much with the staff that we have or the suppliers that we have, and when you're growing like that, it makes it extremely difficult to scale in a quick way. Kate, I happen to know that, you know, because of the coffee scenario, and trying to get into someone like a Kroger, is that easy?
Getting in is not easy, and then you have to make sure you can support that volume really quickly. That's a big step for most companies.
Yeah, and not only that, just the freebies that someone like that wants, it's cost prohibitive. I mean, you have to have very deep pockets. So when you start talking about food entry and the beverage company entries, when you start looking at it, you get companies that can get to that $1 million, $2 million level, and then you don't see very many in that 2 to 10, and then they gotta go 10 and up. And the reason for that is that there's scalability, and they get gobbled up by bigger firms. And that's the key, right? Having that niche, something that's attractive, something that has an aspect to be able to grow, having great marketing, right? Something that's sexy to an investor, you know, but understanding what your limiting factors are.
Well, and it's everybody here, again, I'll say is different, and that's why we like the interactive. If you don't have a company, who is looking to start a company, you know? You are. Well, is it something that you are going, I have a passion about this, or one of my very good friends, who's one of my first business partners, he's talk about a serial entrepreneur. He looks at trends and builds business off the trends. He's starting a business, starting a business on hearing aids. You know, they deregulated hearing aids now. You don't need the medical thing. It's a booming market. So he's like, and he's got all the numbers. He spent a tremendous amount of money, but he's been planning this for a year, understanding that hearing aids were going to be deregulated, no medical degree needed, all this good stuff. He's got suppliers set up developing these things, and it just launched this month. And it's a huge market. Now he's going to run it as long as he can. But so he's building a business based on growth potential. I see the huge growth potential. That's what I'm going to do. So there are people like us, we went into a business with a passion. So we weren't really sure what the potential was, and that's not the best way to go about it. But we knew it was our passion. This gentleman is going after where I can see market. I see a large market, and I'm going to go after that market. And then when that dries up, he's going to do it again. He's made himself a lot of money over the years, just by being very targeted. Like now it's hearing aids. You know, next month it's going to be, in COVID, he was doing air purifiers, made a very good living at it. So it's like, I see these markets, I'm going to attack them. So I don't know if everybody's got a different story here, but it depends on where you are.
In his particular case, what he's doing is taking his core skills, sales and marketing, and he is just applying those same skills to different products. And he's done extremely well for himself. Okay, so when we talk about some of the limiting factors on the other side of the equation, concentration risk. Concentration risk when we're looking at customers. As a small business, I will tell you, generally speaking, 95% of us have concentration in customers. We get one big customer, we're not going to kick them out the door, right? Because that's kind of our gravy train. That's kind of what's making us. The key there is to not just simply diminish that client, but grow around it so that you're building up, right? So you're adding to that customer base, and rather than having one client that's 50% of your business, that one client still represents that same dollar amount, but now you have 10 customers and he's down to 20%. Ideally, what we want our largest customer to be 15% or under. That's just a rule of thumb. Now, I will tell you, we just sold about a $25 million company, and one of his top customer was 30%. When we started working with him, he was 100%. But we worked with him for 16 years. Now, that's one of those things.
That's a lot of tutelage.
Yeah, and a lot of forensic accounting. When we also talk about, concentration in employees, right? We don't necessarily think about it, but if you have key employees, making sure you try and lock them up, right? And there's different ways. You don't have to give them ownership to lock them up. You can create long-term incentive plans or long-term comp plans, for example, where maybe you're giving them a percentage of the profits, but you only pay out half the profits this year, and they get the next half, the second half the following year. And it becomes a ladder. Now they're going to have to walk away from some big numbers, potentially, if you're continuing to grow. So just think about those types of things. Industry, if you guys remember back in 2008, 2006 timeframe, we were big into the automotive here. A lot of the tool and dies that were here locally crashed and burned because General Motors went away. All of those businesses just kind of went away because they were tied up in one industry. Supplier. This is one that's becoming more and more of a challenge for many of us, particularly, and again, I'll go back to the tool and die. People saying, well, I have 3 different vendors, right? I got three suppliers of steel. Really? Are you sure? Yeah, I got A, B, and C company. That's who I'm using it. Where's A, B, and C company getting it from? The same mill. So sometimes it's not just about what you're looking at and how you may be doing different things, making sure that you understand that true supply line.
And that, Aaron is right. That is really critical right now. One of the first things we do with our clients now is really do the forensics of where everything comes from, because we've had really catastrophic issues with trying to get people on the market that we just didn't know the supply chain. The supply chain, everybody knows, has been really tough. Well, it's the flow of it is pretty critical to know. Aaron, you watch where, particularly in the wood industry, we're dealing with a customer potentially going out of business because he can't get his lumber. That was very plentiful. Now it's really tough. Steel is tough, but it's finding where that one supplier comes from. And sometimes it's from here to here to here, all going into one. One wood supplier goes out, even though you had 5 different guys. It's right now, I don't see it getting better anytime soon.
Not industry, and it's tough, right? So he's got 90% of his supply comes from one supplier. That one supplier is getting older. He's in a rural part of Kentucky, and he can't find anybody to work. So now we're trying to get a little different strategy. We're trying to roll it all up together.
We're trying to buy them.
so it's just to save it, right? So.
What's the deal though? I mean, like, people are having a hard time finding and keeping employees, and from the outside looking in, it's like, we'll just pay them more, but people don't want to leave their house. There's a lot of challenges around that. How do you get people, inculcate a culture where people want to come and work for you and stay there?
When you find that out, you're going to be up here telling everybody, because you'll make a fortune. Because I don't know. Our biggest, we have many meetings a week. Virtually every meeting is we're short of employees. We're short of employees. We're short of employees.
Or we're short of good employees. I have people. I just.
And sometimes
it's not what I want.
Even that. We had a fabricator that had maybe 100 welders. And he goes, I don't care how bad they are. I need somebody welding. And they would be rotating, and he goes, I don't care if they're bad. I need to get this stuff welded. So I don't have the answer to that. It's not, I'm with you, I don't know that it's money, because there's a lot of good money being paid out. It's the individual, and I don't know how to get that. I wish I did, because it's crushing companies right now. It's crushing our clients are just being devastated right now.
Work ethic is something that you don't teach, right? You either have it or you don't. And it's interesting to see. I mean, I do some teaching here at the university. The level of lack of interest sometimes in some of the students that don't want to necessarily drive, right? And this is even in the entrepreneurship program. So if you find someone who has that attitude, you hire them. You can train them to do whatever you need them to do. Because from my perspective, it's all about, do they have the right attitude? And then you just train them, right? Motivation, I can't teach that. Either you have it or you don't, right? You're a driver or you're not. So, I mean, the way I got ahead was simply working hard, right? I'm not the smartest guy in the room, never have been. But I've been afforded the opportunities because I was there doing the job, right?
Yeah, family member who owns child care centers. Family member who owns child care centers, and number one, our kids all need to go to child care, so everyone else can work, and she's going to teach the floor.
No.
So she puts in a $3,000 bonus. If you basically come to work on time and work your shifts and no sick time and all that for 4 months, she pays $3,000 bonus. And the idea is, okay, they're here long enough, they stay, they like the company, she's got a great culture. She goes, it's amazing, the day after I paid them the $3,000, how many of them leave? I'm like, well, then you have to basically, okay, what's the next incentive for them? And she's like, and then you're wondering why my child care expenses, charges have doubled. She goes, I'm paying people $9,000 a year to show up on time.
Yeah.
And she's just like,
Or to show up.
yeah, to show up. I mean,
It's,
It is a very, I mean, we could talk about this the whole time here, because it is, I don't talk to a business that doesn't say we're having very difficult times with employees. I had shouldn't get off track, but I had an electrician at my house, was there till 10 o'clock last night working. I love that guy. We sat there talking, I'm like, I fed him dinner, I'm like, I just want to talk to you about this. And he's done this several nights. He's like, I just want to get this job done for you. I'm like, you don't have to sit here. That guy, if I could hire him, he can do anything. I mean, he's an electrician, but you don't get that. He doesn't want to let us. We're leaving for Costa Rica. He goes, I want everything done before you leave. I'm like, you can have the keys. I want everything done. Well, he 2 nights in a row, he's been there till 10 o'clock. How do you teach that? And I told him, I want to be 20 years old again. Because you can make your way today. If you're ambitious and want to work, there's a lot of work to be done. So, yeah, great question. I could talk about that all day because I see it every day.
so I've labeled this one the evaluation teeter-totter. It's really about your cash conversion cycle, understanding what your product is, and understanding how that actually works. So, and it's really about funding your operation. So if you think about it this way, do I have to pay out a lot of money, wait, because I have to put product on a shelf, wait for someone to come in and buy it, wait for them to pay for it, and then I can get that? Now that's a pretty long conversion cycle of cash, because I have to buy it up front, I have to try and sell it. I have to wait till the client, invoice the client, wait for the client to pay. We had one who was a sporting goods supplier. He would buy soccer jerseys and uniforms for his clients. He would buy them in January, February. He would bill them in March. He would get paid in September. This was $1 million business. His line of credit was $1.5 million.
And he didn't understand it. And truly, here's what we say. Well, you said you don't have. We try to work with our clients, and we sold this company to them. And Aaron was very good saying, this is what the cost of money. It's very, very tough to do. You have to have deep pockets. It's an expense. Before he even bought it, we try to educate everybody. So we want only successes. So Aaron did a great job educating. Here's the money swings. Here's where it's going to go. Oh, I can handle it. Are you sure? Okay. And he bought it. He was out of business within a year. Couldn't carry the funding. And those are getting the professional advice about these things. I say that everybody's at a different spot. That was capital intensive. It was crazy. But not everything is. Look at Shopify. All these things that have come out now. There are some great business opportunities where you have no carrying costs. I see a lot of it. That gentleman I told you about air purifiers was all drop ship. He didn't have any money out of pocket. It was, what a great, I'm like, you're brilliant. You're making
So he's invoicing his customers up front for 50%, not having any cost until later on.
But, you know, that's a different business model that I think is brilliant. And with technology where it is, I think Shopify is the most amazing thing. Don't understand it real well, but I think from what I see, it is awesome. So much drop ship, that the opportunities are fabulous today. I mean, those are really neat things.
Yes, sir.
I have a question about that business that you were just talking about. He had $1.5 million in credit, and so what was the main cause of him going out of business? Just because he didn't have the money to put up?
So we told him what he needed,
Okay.
and he didn't have it.
Okay.
So he thought he could get away with $250,000, right?
So he went into
So he was the smartest guy in the room. Never be the smartest guy in the room, right? If that's,
Yeah, he said he needed he meant to say.
he needed that.
He went in with.
He went in with way less.
That's perfect. No,
Yeah.
that answers my
Yeah,
question.
that's,
I was just trying to figure out.
I heard the same thing. I think that's how it sounded. He needed $1.5 million line. He did go in with $250,000.
That's what the previous owner was actually doing
Got you.
already. But he had been in business for 30 years, probably 40 years. So he already had he was banking himself. So he knew all of that.
He had built it up to that.
The other problem was with that particular business, 100% of what he did was on chicken scratch in his drawer. And I do mean chicken scratch.
No processes.
No process,
You talking about the guy that bought it or
The guy who sold.
guy that sold it. So I had to build the financial statements from chicken scratch.
But then I was gonna say, but you guys built the processes too, correct?
Yeah, oh yeah, we help.
Yeah, I had to. Otherwise, he had nothing to sell.
You know that thing he said, don't do, AFAB? We do that a lot.
We're business junkies. Do as I say. Recurring revenue. If I can get a customer that's predictable and I know that they're going to order a certain amount of revenue or a certain amount of product every month. Did you have a question before?
Well, let's just move on. I guess if you want me to ask, I was just going to ask if what you were saying, my business is more of coordination and service, so I'm trying to build it like I have to not build the customer base before I have the supplier base, which is like musicians. So I'm being very careful, and I can't get too many musicians, suppliers, when I don't have people to connect them to.
Right.
You know? So I was just wondering if what you were saying before is more like a widget kind of thing, and when you're supplying, you can't grow one without the other.
Yours is a little more unique than that
Yeah.
because you have to balance those two.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you have to have prospects on both sides.
Yeah.
You're
right.
selling
I'm to both
you're
sides.
selling on both sides,
Yeah.
and you're trying to make that love connection,
Yes.
right?
That's exactly. It's called Senior Music Connection.
Senior music connection. There you go.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. It is different, so I'm trying to convert everything that you're saying.
Yeah. So when we talk about periodic revenue or recurring revenue, the classic example is your AT&T bill, right? If you remember back in the day, when you bought your first phone, you bought your phone and it was $500 and AT&T sales would go like this, right? And then they would come back down. What happened? They've changed all that, right? They now bill it on a monthly basis. What's AT&T's revenue look like? That's what it looks like. Until he comes there and then he buys his phones. So the whole idea here is that made the company more profitable and more predictable. And what investors look at is they want predictability and assurability of that future revenue stream, right? Now there's never anything that's a sure thing, but history will dictate what happens in the future. So, and we can change those things, but we're always looking for that solid pipeline. We're looking for is it something that can be grown? Is there a platform to take this to the next level? And it can be contracts, it can be preventative maintenance contracts, anything like that, right? In Kate's case, it can be Dorothy Lane Market wanting orders every month for a certain type of product. It helps her manage her business. It puts product on the shelf. and she knows how many orders she can fill around that, right? And it gives her a basis to grow her other business. So what makes you stand out? When we think about things like that, you know, we have some people that'll say, I'm just the cheapest guy on the block. That's not a standout, right? That's a short-term way to the bottom of the barrel, right? Never compete on price, plain and simple. There has to be something else. You have to be the best at what you do, specialize, don't generalize again. You know, is it your process, right, that makes you marketable, right? When you have a process, that's probably the single biggest thing that you can have that makes your business attractive. When it's not, if it's all about me as the entrepreneur, then it makes it a little bit harder, right? Service, what we do on a daily basis is we give good service. I mean, that is 100% of why we are as successful as we are, because we have a basic understanding of the business and how to get things done. But when you call at 6 o'clock in the morning, we answer the phone. When you call at 11 o'clock at night, we answer the phone. Our business, you have to stand out. It's not a 9-to-5 job. So it's just the nature of the beast. People call on Friday afternoons. Friday afternoon between 3 and 7 o'clock in the evening is probably the number one time I get phone calls. So I talked about him managing the 50,000 calls. I spend about 6,000 minutes a month on the phone, taking the incoming calls on the buy side and trying to manage through the attorneys and the contracts and all that stuff. So it's what makes you stand out? Is it your marketing? Is it your service? And if you notice, we don't do any marketing. This is a rare occasion where we might do some marketing.
So how do people find you then, if you don't do marketing?
It's all through, I should say, it's 90% is through professionals.
Yeah.
Accountants that we've worked with, attorneys we've worked with will say, you know, I've got a client that's looking to exit, getting older, maybe you should talk to them. But most all of our business comes from professionals calling us up saying, will you work with Aaron? And then a lot of it, we've been doing this a while, I hate to say it, but is these guys reselling their company. So they bought a company from us way back when. They're like, it's time for me to get the heck out. Will you know, I liked how you did it. That has been a huge draw. And that's just being out there for a long time. You know, we bought a bunch of businesses, then we've represented. So we don't do, this truly is the first piece we've ever done. And it was, we were sitting having coffee. I said, we just should order something, and, you know, let's do it. But it is talking, and it's listening and getting our professionals. Our professionals trust us. And in most businesses, particularly service, people have to trust you. So we're going to say, your retirement is big. There, in many cases, people are putting their retirement in our hands. So me knocking on the door, it's kind of hard to get their trust. If their accountant says, you know, go to these guys, that's a much easier way in. So that's, for us, that's how we do it. But we're service. All we do is service. I mean, you know, there's a lot of things we do, but it's that service and reputation, and that takes a lot of time.
And 30 years to build.
Yeah.
40 in his case. So, but it comes back to, that question really comes back to customer satisfaction, right? So we don't necessarily get repeat business, but our referral business is probably 60% of what we do now. Now, some of that referral business I don't want, but I take it. And the reason we take that is I don't tell our CPAs or our attorneys no, because it may be something that I don't want, and it's not really worth the time, but the next deal that comes down the pike, I want it. So sometimes you just got to take one for the team.
Our niche has been, we'll work with any company. We are business junkies. So if you've got a $5,000 business, we'll work with you. We love learning about business and talking to business owners. It's our passion. We've worked with $100 million companies, and you love that because it's a great payday for us. But I can't tell you how many under $10,000, literally, that we've sat and talked to and put just as much time and energy in it. That's our kind of niche is, we just love business. I love, entrepreneurs are the smartest son of a guns I've ever met. Every time I come away from a meeting, I tell my wife when I get home, I said, I learn something every time. I don't care if it's the porta potty company or whatever it is. People are brilliant. When they are successful, you're not successful by accident. So I guess the biggest thing I'd say when you leave here, talking to other business owners is critical because they all have something to give you. Like I said, we've been doing it for 30 years and I don't come away from a meeting going, God, that was a great idea that guy had. I mean, I hear great ideas. I love talking to business owners. And I think that's great for business owners to get in those groups and just talk business.
I mean, we've sold some pretty interesting businesses over the time, and you just don't even think about it. You know, thinking about, ever heard of the concrete chipping company? Anybody know what that is? We have one. Basically what this is, you see the cement trucks going down the road, right? What happens is that cement is adhering to the inside of the drum. Inside those drums, there are these steel blades that are basically mixing it, and as the cement goes around, it gets a lot sharper and sharper. Well, someone has to go in and climb into the drum, which the door is about this big, so it can't be a big person, with a handheld jackhammer, and jackhammer this stuff out.
You have to do that like once a month on a cement truck.
Okay?
Great business model because it's recurring income, right?
Right.
Who do you get to work? The biggest problem they have is employees. Now,
And it's one of the
they make a
dirtiest
ton of
jobs
money.
and dangerous jobs.
It was on Dirtiest Jobs, America's Dirtiest Jobs. It was put on America's Dirtiest Jobs.
It's crazy. But there was a business, it was a $3 million gross revenue business. It was throwing off 30% on the bottom line. So he was making $1 million a year. And it was all labor and service. Jackhammers, earplugs.
Keep it moving. We're running.
We're running. Okay. Hub and spoke. Please, 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 if you don't listen to anything else, do not make your business about you. When we walk into a business and all we hear is, well, I do this and I do that and guess what? Even in a service business like you're talking about, it's not about you, it's about your process. And if you make it about the process, about the people, about your management style, and empowering the people to do the things that they're supposed to do, now I've got something that's saleable.
And it's a quality of life. We say sellable because that's our when we talk to people, we say make
It's our
it
paradigm.
sellable. But we're not saying to sell. Some people want to keep it forever. The point is to make it sellable means you can walk away from it. If you can't walk away from your business for a week, a month, you don't have a business. And that's a quality of life. For us, it's a quality of life. If we can't walk away, there's a quality of life. I've got 4 kids, I've got a wife. I still want that side. Now there was a time building it, you don't get all that. But we built towards that model. And that, Aaron's right, that's the number one thing in business because you have a quality of life and the saleability and it means a bigger value for you. I mean, all those things, but these things are key. Process, call it McDonaldizing. And in McDonald's, anybody can make the fries. The process is there.
And the fries are the same here as they are over there,
That's right. You're
right?
getting the same product every time. McDonald's your business, so you're getting quality product, and you can plug and unplug people very easily. Particularly right now with the employee issues. But the employee processes are getting even bigger.
Yeah, and as is automation is getting a lot more integrated into the production of our goods and services. And again, we'll come back to just make sure, right? Understanding these numbers, right? Your numbers are the things that, at the end of the day, you get basically that's your report card. How are we doing, right? Treat your business with respect. And what I mean by that is, it's okay to put certain expenses through your company, but when you put a lot of what we'll call the candy and personal expenses through the business, we understand why we do those things, but do it judiciously. And at a period of time, if you're really truly thinking about exiting or doing other things, you have to wean yourself off of that. And it's tough to do. What people are looking for, if I look at it as, if you have good, solid books, and I look at the books, and I don't have to do what we call a lot of the add backs to understand what the true free cash of the business is. It makes it truer and easier to create that wealth or attractiveness to an outside investor.
And share those numbers internally.
Yes.
One of the best lessons I learned was in all my companies, that all the matrices were there. What we were making. Don't shy away from making a lot of money, or make people aware that you're not making a lot of money. You know, you want people to be a part of the answer. So if you share and you're saying, this is what we're doing, we would put it up, everything, how much we sold, what our profit was, when I told you about when news accountants would say, this is where we're falling off, hey, IT's not making it. We gotta do something. Everybody knew. Everybody in the company knew, and that was valuable because everybody took part and took ownership in the success of the company. And so I say, share those metrics. Just let everybody know, and it's amazing how they come in and go, I'll bet you this is why we're not doing well in IT. We had an issue with IT, always comes back, this is probably why. And they take ownership of it and try to fix it. Again, we're not the smartest people in the room, but employees are really bright if you give them the information. So don't shy away from giving them I'm a big proponent of sharing everything with employees.
But again, come back to break it down into things that they can understand, right? Don't just tell them I have a $10 million goal. Tell them things like, okay, we need to ship a certain number of bags of coffee each month or each week. Make it as measurable as possible and then post it. Our goal is 100, right? 100 a day, 100 an hour, whatever it happens to be. And then keep tracking that. And when you track it, it's amazing what happens. And then reward it, right? Have a party, buy them lunch, do something, but you're recognizing the fact that those are the things that are going to drive the business. Because when I send that 100 bags of coffee out, it's translating into my overall goal. But sometimes those overall goals, while they're meaningful for us as entrepreneurs, they're not for our employees. So break it down into what those true drivers are, what the trends are. And when people start looking at that, you start posting monthly trends, annual trends, people like to see that, right? We have one client who is extremely anal about making sure that he has an entire room about the size like this, and it has whiteboards all the way around it. And he has management meetings in there every day. Every day, 5 minutes, standing, no chairs, and he goes through the metrics. You have a board, I have a board, you have a board, you have a board, and we talk about what's happening. It's now I'm holding you accountable, right? It was one of those things where when you start to look at something like that, he took this and took it to a whole different level, but it works. Now, he's got a manager up there that does what he used to do, and the fact of the matter is, his office isn't even at the plant. His business is up in Troy. He has an office in Oakwood.
It's making him money and
He's
process. It's process oriented. He unplugged himself. His quality of life is better. His kids are in his office all the time. It's wonderful to see. Quality of life. You can still make really good money, work really hard, but it's the process that make you work smart.
So I think we're 2 minutes over.
Yeah, we're a couple minutes over, but people got to keep moving. But if anybody's got any questions, we'd love to answer them now. If not, I know everybody's got an 11 o'clock coming up. We've got our cards. Feel free to call us anytime.
Just a question about the process part. Is there normally like what's your first step in building the process before you actually go to actually build it? Is there one thing that you always do every time, or is that something that...
So when we're talking about something like that, it's really understanding what you do. What do I do, right? And it's one of those, sometimes we get into situations where people just go, well, I do it because this is how I've always done it, or it's just because there's so many different variables, I don't write it down. If you think about, from that perspective, what you're talking about, whatever your business is, write it down. These are the steps that I do, right? And when you begin to write those things down, it'll all of a sudden jump right out at the page at you, and it'll be like, now I can teach somebody.
When we work with new companies, a lot of times if they don't have processes, we do that. We just go write everything you do, from how many phone calls you take to You know, if you're doing sales or if you're doing the quoting, let's just put it all down. We try not to make it like seem like a lot of work to do, but just put everything down. You take 10 phone calls a day, okay. You do quoting, let's do that. But then we start building the processes out from there so you can actually replicate it.
The hardest thing that we have to do when we're trying to, in our business, our day-to-day business, is not sell the business. It's actually unwinding you guys from the business. Time's up. that literally is the biggest challenge, is making sure that you are not so integral to that hub and spoke of the, if you are the hub of everything that goes on.
That's okay. But
Do you see any trends in the size of business and like when does that ever start to happen naturally, or do you see it in big businesses as much as you see it in small?
Yes, okay? So I see small companies that are extremely well run and extremely well process oriented, and they're at a certain point where they just are able to do the things that they need to do because they have a process and it's not about them. One of the examples I'll use is there's someone who's talking later. Her name is Betsy Westhover, and she runs a company called the Congruity Group, and they do customer focus or customer advisory boards. She's got a process. She doesn't do it. She has built her business. She is now the spokesperson. She writes books. She talks on the lecture circuit. That's what she's got 6 people. Small, right? And then I've got big companies that can't get out of their own way. So, you're welcome.